for 2022. This is the Dish Pig, where we go on a journey of discovery in the food and booze world. I'm your host, Nick Sherry. So good to be back this year. We have lots in store, so why not hit subscribe, share with your friends, and follow us on Instagram at _dish_pig. Well, we're kicking off the year with wine, friends. We're talking to Phil Hude. Phil has been in the wine retail business for over 25 years, having taken the reins of Armadale Cellars back in 1997. These days, some people use apps such as Vivino and Delectable to choose their wine. Others use Phil. Armadale Cellars is located in the affluent, leafy inner east of Melbourne and is one of the few remaining independent owner-operated wine merchants in the city. So how did this young working-class lad from the northern suburbs of Melbourne gravitate to being one of the most well-respected wine merchants in the country? Well, let's jump in and find out. Okay, here we are, Phil Hude. Thank you very much for having me here at Armadale Cellars. We are in the cellar.
We are
in the basement.
Yep, and thank you for the opportunity.
No, not at all. Now, very quickly to jump in, what was the last thing that you cooked for yourself?
Last night I've just discovered air fryers, which sounds ridiculous.
Yes.
I bought one about 15 months ago.
Yep.
During pandemic. And
pandemic purchase.
And sat it in the corner. And my daughter got sick of seeing it there, and she said, "Daddy, you're never going to bloody use this thing." So she started using it, and then I got a fascination, and for the second time last night, the first time I used it, I cooked chips, which was pretty funny because I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. And so I just bloody fried these chips off, or potatoes off. And then last night, though, I got serious, and I had a piece of salmon with 2 ears of corn, and they came out amazingly. And I had that with 3/4 of a bottle, I'd say, of Burgundy while I was watching the Ozark series, which I absolutely love. So
very nice.
Binged on the Ozarks and Burgundy.
I've heard, there's been a ton of press about these air fryers. I mean, my sister and brother-in-law just got one about 3 weeks ago. I've been holding off a little bit, but I'm hearing pretty good. I mean, it's supposed to be the healthier option. You just put in a little drop of oil and fry away, and you still get the crispness. And
as you can see from my incredibly athletic body, I need to somehow be better at what I do in terms of I'm just unashamed. I consume life too greatly, and I
like that quote. Yeah, I like that quote.
Yeah, and it's not a quote; it's a reality. But and part of the problem of the business I run is that it is giving high-grade pleasure in wine and food terms to people a lot. And like tonight, I'm taking all the staff out to dinner.
Oh, beautiful.
To a really good Japanese restaurant in Turak. Highly recommend Ushu, I think it's pronounced. And and we can take your own booze there, which is even better. So, and I'll probably eat and drink enough for a third world country gone possessed. So, that's the trouble. I really do live an exotic life, and I sometimes forget about that and how much I consume in food and booze. And it is, it's something that, as being in the industry, you have to watch, because it's very easy, as I did last night, to go home and open a bottle of Burgundy and watch Ozarks and get to the 3rd episode and think, I'll finish that bottle quick. But luckily I didn't finish the bottle. I only got 3/4 of the way through, because I decided I would have a swim last night as well. Which sounds hilarious after 3/4 of a bottle of Burgundy, but I went and had a swim afterwards for about 20 minutes just to try and get rid of my COVID fat.
Oh, very nice. Well, let's kind of take it back to the start of this, overindulgent life. Where'd you grow up?
Yes, I grew up in the northern suburbs, and Montmorency as a child, and then Rosanna as a teenager, and we had a big park, and I used to run down every afternoon after school and run like the wind kicking the footy, and so I was thin and athletic to a large degree until I got into hospitality in my 20s, when I discovered pubs, and I think that's when I discovered beer, and as Homer Simpson would say, one of the great 5 food groups, pizzas and fast food, and and I just consumed it all, and that's when I think I realised that in hospitality it was about watching or having the ability to please others by being hospitable.
Yeah.
And in those days I worked in pubs, and it was a whole different landscape to what I do now. I mean, it was so different, I can't tell you. But in essence, I've always been in hospitality, and it is, in my mind, a true hospitality person is someone who engages people and looks after them, and in whatever shape or form that you're doing hospitality, and you give them the pleasure of your company and whatever you can give them, food, wine, or whatever wise.
Of course.
Now I'm at the sort of higher echelon, the higher peak of Maslow's hierarchy, let's call it. I'm in that higher percentage of, being able to deal in super fine wine, and we obviously go to a lot of great restaurants as well to do some of the dinners.
So, Eve, so when you're at school, like, when you were kind of looking towards your future and kind of growing up and getting towards those adult years, was there ever a stage where, you had other ideas about what your career might be, where you might go, what you might,
Great question.
Want to do with your life?
Yeah, I'm watching my kids now pain through that, and it's always interesting to, and I get frustrated with them, but then I think to myself, well, what was I like at that age? At, late teens, early 20s. And I remember distinctly not really knowing what path I wanted. And although Form 5, when you're given what was called in those days the VIS, I think it was called Guide, to then in HSC work out where you're going to go on your path and your subjects.
Yep.
I remember distinctly one of the Christian brothers where I went to school saying to us, pick a path that you think of, something you enjoy. And I thought, what do I like doing? Well, I like going to the Bundoora red light disco, and I like going, I like going to the pub, and I thought, hospitality, which I dare not tell the Christian brothers that, because I actually got suspended once when I was at school for admitting that I drank 6 cans of beer at the Bundoora red light disco. When I got knocked out playing footy for the school, and one of the brothers said, "How do you feel?" after giving me some smelling salts, and I said, "Like I've had 6 cans at the Bundoora disco." That got me suspended. So pretty simply for me, I had no idea. I mean, I think I was like a lot of kids where I knew, I liked hospitality because it was good fun, and people look at hospitality and wine in general and see what I do and think, "Oh, that's the greatest life. You've got the greatest life ever." They miss the incredible amount of hours and all the little detail that you need to do and the frustrations, like everyone does have in their own jobs, I'm sure. But there's a lot of work in doing it and executing it properly.
Yeah.
And, there are days where we don't execute it properly because you haven't thought of every detail, even though,
And do you remember what so you said you were working in pubs initially. Do you remember what that very first job was in hospitality?
Yes, my dad got me, the joys of... maybe nepotism, I don't know, but basically my father got me a job through a mate of his who owned a hotel in the city, the Museum Hotel, and it was a really tough publican, Frank Sharon. And he gave me a job as a kitchen hand to the chef, getting stuff out of the fridge and helping the chef. And I reckon I lasted about a month because I had absolutely no idea about cuts of meats and different things. And he'd say, "Go and get me the eye fillet," or "Go and get me this," and I just kept stuffing up, and I was as green as a Martian. So, I'm not sure I lasted too long at that job. But then I think, the real foray for me was in Target Hotels. After I went and did uni, hotel catering management.
Okay.
But only lasted 2 out of 4 years because it was an incredibly accounting-based forum. You could become a fully qualified accountant after another year's study after the 4-year course.
Right.
And I'd never done accounting at college. Why? Because my father was an accountant, my brother was an accountant, I didn't want to be an accountant, which was a big mistake, that one. Anyway, in the end it worked out okay because, I got told to go forth by the invigilator because, I'd failed at basic accounting A 4 times, passed everything else, loved what I'd done in terms of the stuff that I'd done at hotel catering management. It was the old FIT, now Vic Uni.
Okay.
And loved hospitality and was really shattered by that. And to be honest, I was only in my early 20s, and like a lot of kids, I think I probably regretted going straight from school to uni. But one thing, that God bless the Christian brothers, as much as they were an interesting mob of people to be taught by, they gave you a structure and they were very rigid. And I think as a kid, I needed that.
Right.
Some kids need a bit of rigidity and straightening up, let's call. And that's what I think that's what helped me. I think otherwise I would have just meandered along. And
it sounds like you were kind of, at an early stage, you were kind of jumping into the business side of things as well. Like, it wasn't necessarily you were just jumping in and, just working from pub to pub and just, pulling pots and seeing where it was going. You kind of had an idea in your head about, you wanted to be in the industry and you wanted to gain a bit more business knowledge. Was that something that you were kind of working towards, or?
I must admit, obviously the game was try and be a pub manager.
Right. Okay.
So I got to a lot quicker than I thought I would to assistant manager, and the gap between assistant manager and full licensee/manager was quite big, and most of it represented age and experience, which I then would have had to wait another 10 years. And as much as I felt like I was a career person, and I think I always have been, which I sort of see that not as much happening today. Kids seem to be happy to, fritter between industries, etc.
Yeah.
Albeit, not that anyone wants to get stuck completely in something they don't like. I mean, again, to restate, I'm just fortunate I found an industry that I absolutely love. I mean, I've always loved the hospitality, whether I was in pubs or doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge thing. And I have said this before, but, I read about a tweet that Richard Branson did and said 3% of people get up in the morning and love what they do. And to me, that's, I love what I do. I mean, absolutely, I couldn't think of anything better to do. I'd be unemployable now anyway. And, so for me, I'm the master of my own business, and, I'm not deluded. It's a very small micro business in the scheme of things, but, it's a specialised business, and some people think that's special that you've been able to carve a specialised business out of what you do. But, I've just been fortunate, and I think, as my 94-year-old dad, God bless him, says, life is timing, the rest is bullshit. And, a lot of the things I've done, I've had this business 25 years this year, and there was one time especially I thought that, the business was in trouble, and I could have absolutely imploded the whole thing. And part of that is timing and what you do and the decisions you make, and some of it, obviously a lot of it's experience. And it's been a huge journey, and I've had, I'm not a Rhodes Scholar, and I've had to learn a lot over the process. And sure, I went to uni and learnt things at my first course, and then I did a second course in, so I did hotel catering management as a youngster, and then I went back and did Roseworthy, which was wine marketing.
Okay.
Which, when I did it, was extremely wine-based. It's now not as. If we did wine marketing, it'd be very much marketing statistics and export-based.
Yeah.
So when I did it, I think it was great that I did it when I did it, because it encapsulated winemaking, wine growing, and marketing. So it was a fully rounded course.
And did you already have the wine bug at that stage? Like when, because if you were coming from the pub scene, I mean, what?
Yeah, great question.
What year were we talking? Like when you were kind of working an assistant kind of publican kind of era?
So I did the 2 years at FIT, got out of that. Got dragged by a local neighbour guy who worked for Target hotels, who were nothing to do with Target stores, but the hotels, which were the Old England in Heidelberg and Kramer's Night Spot in Preston, which is where I was based, which had a huge disco, showing my age.
Okay.
And it was like the Wild West, to be honest. It was mad. And they had, I ended up assistant manager and licensee of another hotel they had called Drums, which was opposite Pentridge, when it was operating in prison.
Yeah.
And that was interesting, to say the least. And
quite a few characters probably walked through those doors over the years.
Well, the whole thing of Underbelly had a distinct meaning for me, because most of those guys I'd served and talked to.
Okay.
Because one of the bars was called a Screws Bar, which is where the prison officers drank.
Yep.
And, a number of the luminaries of Underbelly, Chopper and Benji Veneman and all sorts of people drank there. There was a couple of bikie clubs drank there regularly. It was a pretty interesting customer-based demographic, nothing like what I'm dealing with now. And
so for some of our international listeners, so they're probably hearing Underbelly saying, "What the hell is that?" But you're pretty much talking about the underworld crime scene of Melbourne.
Yeah, exactly. And so I knew the governor, and I knew all the people. I'd hear all the comments and discussions, because it was a very small bar, and you'd hear most things. It was a very interesting life. But I was manager of that hotel, and, we had a public bar which had an SP and a lot of wharfies and very working class style guys at, Coburg. And we had a kitchen out the back, of Chinese, as you would, kitchen where, people would sort of converge, and every now and again the prison officers and the wharfie union guys would converge, and there'd be a bit of a fracas for 3 or 4 minutes, but they'd usually be pretty quick, thank God.
Yeah.
But it was such a different landscape, and I'm not sure how I got through that actually, because I'm, as you can see, not a big bloke in height or muscle.
Like getting through it is in like surviving physically, or just trying to pissing off and doing something else.
Yeah, well, that and Kramer's. I mean, when we're at Kramer's, we used to have discos that had 1,000 kids on a Saturday night. It was completely.
It's a lot of people.
We had I had 10 bouncers.
Yeah.
We had a guy from the North Melbourne Giants basketball who would just point where the fights were, and we would run through the crowd
because he was
tall enough.
He was tall enough to see them all.
It was complete madness, and it was the biggest venue in the northern suburbs, and probably second or third biggest in Melbourne at that point for disco. And Monday and Saturday nights were huge. And so I was only an assistant manager at Kramer's, and Selman Balm and all sorts. I sort of worked my way through the whole regime, did every job imaginable at the pub, and decided that I loved that part of it and the socialisation. I think socialisation's always been a big thing for me. And going back to the very first question, it's why I love eating and drinking and the whole aspect of that. And because you're getting paid for it and it's your job and you're enjoying it. So for me, the problem I've got with life in general is that I'm not sure when I actually turn off. Because, for me, if I go on holidays, inevitably, unless I go to Fiji and even in Fiji, there's a bloody good wine shop.
Called?
It's called Victoria Wines and Spirits, strangely. So, wherever I go, I'm either hosted or people say, oh, you got to come and drink with me. Or, and then you end up on the gas and eating great food and drinking great wine and having great times. But, it's just when can I settle down? And so
you'd probably have to go to Antarctica or something just to get away from everything.
Yeah, no, it's exactly right. It's a tough one in that regime. And for the first time ever this year, in about a month or two, I'm going to a lifestyle resort, I think they call it, which is basically a detox centre, I think. But anyway, a friend of mine, God bless her, who owns Carmen's, the food bar people. Carolyn's convinced me to come to this bloody... I think she realises I like life too much. She says, listen, you're going to come away, you won't be able to drink or have coffee or whatever for a week. And I said, well, I hope they've got straitjackets because God help me.
Tell you what, though, I think at this time of year, especially this time of year in general, there'd be quite thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people who would like to come with you.
Probably. I think it's Gwyn Garner or something it's called. And I think Hugh Jackman started it. I can't remember the story. The trouble is my life has so much in it that I'm, I almost live from week to week.
Yeah.
And I've got Rachel and a few others here who keep me in line and have, all sorts of event structures and diary structures to know what I'm doing. And
because that's tough. Because if you're not, if you don't kind of keep a focus on it and try and find that balance, it's it's burnout is just comes calling.
As you can see from my body, balance has not always been in my vocab, but that's right. It is tough, and also I definitely am almost bordering the workaholic stage. For those listeners who didn't hear that properly, I said workaholic, not alcoholic. But workaholic is, I quite often do, I'll do a 12 or 14-hour day and not think about it, or I'll just realise it's gone so quickly. But again, I think that's a product of loving what you do. And then I know if I do go on holidays, and again, holidays for me might be going to Europe, which means, then I get on it and I'm meeting suppliers and running amok because I just love Europe. And, there's not many wine places in the world that I don't love. I mean, I've been to a hell of a lot of places in the world that grow wine, and I'm fascinated by how amazing they are. And I'm fascinated by the variances. And, you go to somewhere like Queenstown, in central Otago, amazing.
Mm.
You go to somewhere like the Napa, is unbelievable. You go to somewhere like, obviously, Burgundy is my pinnacle. Italy has the most amazingly beautiful regions imaginable. And so wherever you go, South Africa, I mean, I've been to so many great places that are just amazing in terms of their, whether it's topography or their people or their cultures or their wine. The whole thing's obviously a meld. I think until you go to those places, then that's what truly inspires you. And that's been good for me here because I've used my... obviously, I tell the ATO I'm working my guts out when I go overseas and do my trips. And then, that comes... I can speak with confidence because I've been to those places. And I think until you go to those places, it's hard to understand them. You know, it's why
Definitely,
I
yeah.
love going to Champagne, and that's why I love Champagne, because you know, when you go to Champagne and you experience it, and again, I've been really fortunate to, you know, be shown some of the best by the best, and that's just, you know, it's a true experience.
Yeah.
That not a lot of people get to, you know, do a couple of times in their life, let alone probably, I'm frightened to think how many times I've done it.
So do you remember? Because you know, I'm trying to picture this bloke who's working in these, you know, rough pubs. There's the 1,000-person disco. Someone's pointing out the fights.
Yep.
When did it transition to, holy shit, I've had a sip of this, you know, whatever wine it might be, that first kind of wine experience.
Yeah.
And this is I've got a feeling that this is really gonna suck me down a hole that's gonna take me on a bit of a journry. Do you remember what that first wine experience was?
Yeah, whenever we do wine courses, I tell people that my life-changing part. So a lady at the pub, she was the catering manageress, Mary Whelan, and she said to me one day, you know, Phil, you can't be drinking Bundy and beer all your life, and would you like to try wine? And this is in my mid-20s, so, you know, and most kids, even nowadays, will cut their teeth on sweet stuff early. Yeah. And, you know, when I was a kid, it was West Coast coolers and Island coolers, or Bundy and Coke and Scotch and Coke, and everything was with Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
So, you know, Mary said to me, because we used to sit down as pub managers and be given a meal to have and eat, and so we got a glass of wine, and to be honest, it was probably pretty average wine at the time, but you know, it started me thinking, and then I had the want or desire or just thought process, why don't I go and visit a winery?
Okay.
And I think that's when it clicked, because I then got fascinated with how passionate, and I think the passion part's a distinct underlying factor of what I do and what I gained from and what I see people have in this industry, because no one's getting rocket science money, but because you're passionate and you love what you do, you have the experiences like I discussed about going overseas or whatever it is. Went down, you know, last week, and 10 minutes by tractor, had 2 spectacular bottles with good friends George and Ruth Mahaley from Paradigm Hill, and, you know, and had a truly amazing gastronomic experience.
Yeah.
And that was just last Wednesday. And
I had lunch there 2 weeks ago.
You did?
Yeah, sensational.
It's amazing, isn't it?
We had that. We were at that long table looking out straight onto the vineyard as well.
Nice.
It's spectacular. I did have to put my sunglasses on because I was on the window side. So you got that. You know, you did have the light coming in, but it was fantastic.
So you were down the end of the restaurant.
Yeah, far end. Yeah.
We had the chef's table because George and Ruth are very highly regarded and know the people who own it, the Speddings, very well. And we had the chef's table, and the som, you know, come over and said hello. And we were discussing wine, being wine wankery. And,
wine wankery.
Yeah, a bit of wine wankery. And discussing all things wine. And again, you know, for me, that's what I love, the inclusiveness, let's per se. Again, when I started, I'll be honest, in wine, I'd go to, you know, when you're at cellar doors or whatever, that people are so amazingly generous. When you then discover that you say, like I did, that you wanted to be part of the wine fraternity, I did in the early days see a bit of wine snobbery and this bit of, you know, I can smell and taste this and you can't.
Was that coming from, like, the consumer side mostly?
No, I'm talking about, you know, people who had gained a status in the
wine,
wine industry as critics, let's say.
Got it.
And I'm not just bucketing crickets. Critics. Not bucketing them. And some of my better friends are wine critics. God bless Max Allen and Nick Stock and a few others, and Jenny Port. And but no doubt, there was a bit of an old school regime of how do they keep their place at the top? And it was because, you know, they wanted to. I mean, you know, they trained very hard, and you know, we have this bit of a joke here that, you know, you look at my body, I'm an elite athlete. I train very hard, and you know, that's because there's no doubt to try lots of wine and food, you know, wine with food, because that's where wines tend to shine. Great wines, anyway. That's how you can then express that passion, and that how that works, and to the average layperson, because there is a lot of greyness within wine. I mean, it's an incredibly subjective topic.
Yeah.
No doubt that you would then express your opinion, which is correct to you. But again, like a lot of things in life, a little knowledge is dangerous. And, you know, some people will make comment about a wine without knowledge of X, Y, or Z, you know, processes that it's made, combination of wine and food they're having, Look, again, I'm not deluded by the fact that I still feel like I'm in learning process even decades down the track. I mean, it's a never-ending learning philosophy, wine and food, and wine and food matching, and all the different cuisines and regimes of wine that you can take on. So, I mean, if I could win Tats Lotto tomorrow, all I'd do is I'd just start travelling around the world to every wine region.
Yeah.
The trouble is I'd be sending back wine for the guys here to sell, and they'd hate me. But because that's the trouble, you get lost in it. And that's why when you go to Cellar Door or visit a winery and you're on holiday and you're relaxed and you're with the one you love, you tend to buy wine. And you think, God, how did I spend all that? It's easy to do. I do it when I'm on wine buying trips.
So you went to the winery early. You were saying like in your mid 20s when you you got to experience. Seeing a winemaker actually go through the process and see their passion. Yep. So then what was your kind of plan in your head from there? Like once you kind of got the bug and you're moving forward, what were the next steps in your career?
I certainly found myself spending every spare moment going to wineries and wanting to learn, asking all the stupid questions. And whenever people do our courses here at the Cellars or we do forums, I don't think there's anything like a bad question, because there's always ways to interpret. People ask really good questions about what does this mean and why do you see this in the wine. And I think that's important for someone learning about wine, because again, there's a lot of greyness, there's a lot of interpretive aspect about it, and like a lot of things that are it's an art form, so it can be interpreted in certain ways, just like 10 people can look at a painting, give it 10 different interpretations. Wine's no different, albeit there are certain aspects of wine that I think can be obvious. And that, again, depends on your training and your background. And
one's white, one's red.
Correct. Yeah, there's some of those, some are obvious. and then there are certain aspects that are real, but there are some of the aspects are really, you can only gain them by training and interpretation. But then, again, go back to those early days, I used to sit there and think with some critics, or when, I'd been invited to different tastings, I think, my God, where did these people make this stuff up? And, part of that was a learning process. And everyone has their own experiences. And some people love to show off about the fact that they've got more experience and can keep garbling on and like to hear the sound of their own voice. I feel like I'm saying that now after talking about 3 minutes non-stop. But reality is that, I believe that the more you try, the more experienced and the more, I think, validation you have to comment, albeit, I read incessantly about wine. I listen to podcasts about wine all the time. I obviously travel when you can travel as much as I can. I love going to wine regions. I think there's nothing better.
Yeah.
And so that's how you learn. And then talking to the winemakers, and there are some who are just, go back to George Mahaley, just the incredible wisdom from a guy who started in his 50s, basically to start as a vigneron. But obviously had a wine bug before it. But, the amount of knowledge he's got, and now owns a house in Burgundy, and now he just has absorbed it in such a great, and he's an incredibly intelligent human. And I meet so many of those guys, and so I meet guys who have made great wealth in other areas, and usually because they're, seriously high IQ, and then have high net worth and can afford to indulge, but then also, go take a quick path almost towards getting this sort of incredible intel and knowledge, and then obviously immerse themselves around other people who have the bug.
Do you think in ways that do you think in some ways that the expense that comes with trying to get into not get into the wine business, just to be able to taste certain wines and to be able to experience certain wine experiences like that, do you think that scares away some people in a way? Do you think it's because there's a ton of wine out there at very, very good prices that are bloody delicious.
Yeah.
But has that been a negative in any way? Do you reckon scare away people?
Yeah, no doubt. I lose sight a bit of the fact of how elevated, in terms of drinking and quality that I sit in.
Yeah.
But I've purposefully got myself into that regime. I have no desire to go backwards and try cask wines again, or and again, that's okay. I don't want to. I hope we don't sound elitist. And again, the greatest problem I had for the first decade at Armadale was convincing people that we weren't elitist and our prices weren't elitist, and that I'm not elitist. And I think my background, I was fortunate that it was very matter of fact and very working class, and that gave me a credibility to some degree that made me not too snooty.
Yep.
And I've always been very honest and passionate when I talk about wine. So, and I think that's when I've met people in wine. If they're honest and passionate, then that honesty and passion, then to me makes people want to gravitate towards them, because I think most humans just want to be with people who are honest and passionate.
Yeah.
Not rocket science. So, anyone who tries to hide something or make it too elevated, that would be a worry. But again, yes, I fear we're at an interesting stage of the wine world at this point, because I see a lot of the youngsters potentially shying away from the old style, not the old style of wine, that's a bad way to put it, but what has been...
just like the staples in certain parts
Bordeaux,
of the world.
Burgundy, whatever. They're really changing the rules. Not a bad thing. I don't think everything should stay the same forever. But I also find it incredible. What's the word? I just love the fact that, say, people in Burgundy have been farming the same land for 9 generations or for 1,000 years or whatever it is. There's the people in Champagne have toiled for, over a century or 2 centuries, come through 3 wars.
Yeah.
Had to work out who was going to get, the land out of the family and how they were going to hand it down and how they were going to keep the quality. And now, obviously Champagne's a very, it's clamoured for, and, it's really, probably at this stage, Champagne is going through its greatest era of return on investment.
Oh, okay.
But, look, the reality is that then, conversely, you've got, God forbid, all these natural wines which are hitting the market, and you got, other, there's a big movement towards non-alcoholic beverages.
Yeah. Which,
I have a friend who keeps saying to me, Phil, when are you going to stock all these non-alcoholic beverage stuff? And I said, when I open a milk bar. But, which is being terrible. And I understand that, it's not all about a wine has to have alcohol, but for me, obviously a wine is an alcoholic beverage because it's been fermented.
Yeah.
So, I've seen companies try and do alcohol-free or, less alcohol style wines, and they just lack something.
I think when it comes to the non-alcoholic beverages, they've come pretty far in terms of beer. I think there's a few kind of decent non-alcoholic beers.
Very true.
I've only ever tasted one non-alcoholic wine. Clearly don't remember it, so it probably wasn't a good experience. But I'm now seeing a lot of non-alcoholic spirits, and I think I saw a meme or some stupid thing on the internet, recently, where it was, like some bloke buys a bottle of non-alcoholic gin but hasn't discovered cordial yet. You know what I mean? It's like, just go off and, buy some syrup and put it with some water and have that instead.
It's and that's the interesting part. I mean, where does it stop? Because, I love flavours and perfumes and that sort of thing. And I think if I didn't do what I did and someone said, if you had to go to a sliding door moment, I'd almost love to be someone who creates perfumes or, eau de toilette. One of my I remember one day just spending a whole day going up and down the Champs-Élysées and going into perfume shops, and I don't wear, the trouble with being in the industry is you can't wear much in terms of aftershave and stuff because obviously it impacts.
Yeah.
But I love the sensory part of it. So it's the sensory thing, obviously. But yeah, I'm fascinated by people who want to explore the non-alcoholic thing, but I understand that it means they can be inclusive into a
of course
socialization part. So because again, I go backwards. I don't want people. If you at a wine party, we have We're going to do a wine dinner tonight with our staff, and I think there's at least one staff member's partner who doesn't drink, and so obviously we want to keep them inclusive, and so we'll have stuff for them.
Yeah.
And I think, again, for me, socialization is about inclusiveness, no matter what.
Definitely.
For whatever reason, that anyone should never be excluded for any reason.
And then, so Armadale Cellars, where we're sitting now, as we said. So it's been, how many years since you...
25 years this year, so I think it's either September, October, I can't remember exactly, but which would be the actual 25th exact year point.
And you started the business here, or you took over the business 25 years ago? So what was here then?
I took over the business, so it was the guy before me had only had it 2 or 3 years, and he'd struggled.
Yep.
For a number of reasons, and one of his children had a really awful disease which took a lot of his focus and time away.
Right, okay.
Soon after he bought the business, and he wasn't a wine person, so he was relying on a couple of the staff to really guide him, and one of them left not long after he started it all, and he had a really tough regime.
Yeah.
It is a very tough industry. I mean, very competitive, and obviously the two chains, Coles and Woolies, run 85% of it, and then the rest of it is left for little people like us.
Mm-hmm.
So unless you're very focused and you're very you differentiate in a number of realms and take a complete focus and are able to monetize that, and then work out how you staff and costs and all the other things that can stuff a business up, how you control those, then it's a pretty interesting game. And obviously where I am now, and we found this out 10 years ago roughly, when in fact it was longer than that, probably 13 years ago, when the GFC really hit Australia to a large degree, and I saw the distinct sort of the clambering up of our database, and people went from $50 wines to $20 wines, and $20 wines to $10 wines, and then didn't want to buy a dozen, they'd want to buy a 6-pack, and so everything was halved, it seemed, except I was still paying the same rent, and I wasn't halving my staff bill, and so that's when that's when I found the business extremely challenging, to say the least. And it's been a long journey, but there's so many. The thing that hasn't changed is the changes. Meaning there's always changes, and obviously the pandemic's just been incredible.
I can imagine, yeah.
Terrible learning process in some respects, but then, interestingly enough, there was the positives for us were a lot of the local community embraced us, came out of their places, which they'd normally, quite often they'd get in their Maserati and drive past on their way to Tullamarine or their work in the city and might not have ever seen us. But so we were discovered by a number of locals, which I find quite hilarious, having been here for 25 years.
Did you find any uptick? As like a lot of friends of mine really, who they like a cocktail from time to time, but the home bar just seemed to explode with variety and skills, and that really did you see an uptick in that area?
We called it hero bottles. So people were coming in and buying hero bottles. So instead of buying the $20 or $30 or $50 bottles, they're buying $100 bottles.
Yeah,
because they realised they weren't going to restaurants, and they realised that they really needed a treat, because what everyone went through was incredibly tough, especially here in Melbourne, where we were all locked down, and it was a really tough regime. So we'd call it. We had some funny things happen, like 5 o'clock would be like what we'd call the cabin fever hour, where we knew that everyone had been locked up all day. You could have a 1 hour of exercise, if you remember, and you'd just see this. People were going out for their 1 hour walk, and they'd go, I might go to that wine store, because we were an essential business, which I still find incredibly hard to sort of fathom. But anyway, that just shows you where Australians' mentality is if we're an essential business. But God bless them.
Can't go get a haircut, but you can definitely go pick up a bottle of wine.
Exactly. So I felt very fortunate. Especially with lots of mates who own restaurants. They're really still struggling.
Yeah.
So I've made it a real priority to try and go. As you can see, I enjoy going to restaurants, but I'm trying to you help those in the industry, because it is they've had it so hard, and it's still hard even now. because there's the distancing rules. People are still hibernating a bit with the new Omicron thing. But so people came in at 5 o'clock with the cabin fever, wanted to buy hero bottles, and for us as a business, which we pride ourselves on, talking about wine, all the kids, some aren't kids, but some of the people who work here, they're all wine knowledgeable and wine mad like me. And so we'd be talking to them about wines, and they'd love it, and they'd come back the next day and they'd say, "Oh, that wine was absolutely magnificent." And so the local community embracing character was obvious. We even had people, because we're in obviously the hinterland of where we are. We had some of the rich and famous who are, whether they're in entertainment or whether they're whatever they are, would come in and say, we're going to support local. And, so I had some new friends who were just quite hilarious, and they weren't afraid. And some people built home cellars.
Right. Okay.
I had one guy drop about 70,000 on just said, okay.
70,000 just to put the cellar in.
Well, no, that
and his wine.
The cellar was mutually exclusive. We actually put him onto one of our Nigel, one of our guys who owns his own business doing cellars, and he built the cellar for them, and then mutually exclusive to that was the $70,000 worth of wine to fill it.
Holy shit!
Yeah, that was a good sale. There was a bit of haggling went on, I might admit, but till we got to that 70,000. But anyway, they got a very, very, very good deal. Again, it's because they simply wanted to have, they'd never done it, and they thought this would be the time. They had time to think about it. They had time to indulge, and they had time to plan it, and that's what they did.
Yeah.
Same as, I'd almost feel sick from the amount of people who told me they did renovations of some sort.
Oh, I was just thinking, like, one of my lockdown COVID hobbies was, starting a fucking worm farm and like composting. But putting in a cellar and spending 70,000 on wine sounds like a better COVID hobby to me.
Absolutely, they live in Toorak, and that might have helped. No, money. They earned their money. Don't worry. But again, I think it is all about what you want to succeed in. And we did have some people who just decided, again, they would look at their cellar and either top up or take it. I've suddenly discovered Burgundy fill fantastic, except you'll need deep pockets.
Yeah.
And we did see a bit of that. Conversely, our event forum went completely nowhere because we couldn't have live forums for events or courses.
That was going to be something else I wanted to chat to you about, because you're very big on education, and did that start early on when you kind of first took over the business, that you knew you were going to do courses, classes,
Absolutely.
Beginners, advanced, whatever it might be?
Yep. So the only good thing I learned from my first course was when I went to my second course, Roseworthy, and we did wine marketing and the distinct marketing aspect of learning that if you have a business, you either differentiate distinctly and be different, or you be one of the bigger and the better ones, and you're a cost leader. And those you could either be a cost leader or a differentiator. And everyone who wasn't in those two sections were stuck in the middle.
Yeah,
that was the theory, and that was something that really burnt into my brain early days in the sort of wine marketing lessons that I did. And so I wanted to be a differentiator. And I thought to myself, even when I worked for some guys in Eaglemont in the northern suburbs as a youngster, we took on that education for them because I could see that's what would get people to you and talking about your place as a distinctly different place. I didn't want to be a bottle shop. I wanted to be a wine merchant.
Right.
And again, that sounds, a bit elitist, but it's not.
It's a big, it's a big difference, because, like if you're there and, it's like what you're saying about going to a cellar door and you're actually there speaking to the person, you're on site, you're learning about it. It just gets ingrained in you so much more, rather than just, popping down to, I just got to grab, one bottle really quickly or whatever it might be.
Yep. And look, so many people make the error of just choosing from a label or a colour or whatever suits their purpose, a price point.
Yeah.
And they're not being fully satisfied. And that, to me, if you're going to, everyone who earns their money usually earns it pretty hard. And, you want to spend your dollars wisely. So for me, that's why it's good to go to an independent wine merchant, or, and there's a number of good ones in this city, I think, that, give the public the ability to chat to the staff who are knowledgeable and get their money's worth in terms of saying, well, what do you really want? What are you doing? What food are you having?
Yeah.
What's the occasion? And that's what we pride ourselves on. But also, it's why we run such a very heavy education and event forum, albeit, I sort of, first couple of months of COVID, I almost stayed awake at night wondering what the hell I'd do and how I'd keep Rachel and some of the team on who were doing the events part of the business, because I could see it, we were into lockdown. It was really tough.
Yeah.
So we discovered Zoom tastings.
Yep.
And that was one of the great roller coaster rides of the business. It was, and it still is, simply amazing. So we've got one this Saturday, strangely. So we won't say pandemic's ended by any means, but, obviously we're not in lockdown. But they're still going because people like the fact that, they don't have to come travel, they don't have to get a babysitter, they don't have to get dressed up.
Yeah.
They can sit there in their trackies and basically put on the computer and then do their own thing and put the computer on mute. They don't have to, they can speak whenever they want to and tell the other half that, go and get some more charcuterie. And and we do these these Zooms, which are just, I still marvel at how many, because, as you can see in the cellar here, we can get about, I think 18, 20 people at best. And, on some Zooms, we've had 55 couples.
Oh, wow.
So, and then I think this Saturday we've got 80 people, it's 40 couples.
Sensational. Yeah, right.
And so, that's special in the terms of that reach. And we could do more, but it would be how much because at the end of it we do the whole car sales, give away a door prize and, put your order in.
Yep.
So we tell people to either, text or email their order in, and Rachel and the team go silly writing down the orders, and then it's done. It's all legitimate. We put all these little chits in and, within people's names on, and it takes 10 minutes and I garble on with the winemaker or whoever for another 10 minutes, and Rachel gets carpal tunnel writing down all the little chits and puts them in a bucket, and then we draw a prize, and I'm sure people think it's rigged. It's not. And it's amazing. Like, it's just, and that's to monetize, obviously. Otherwise we'd be doing it. That's something I learnt early days, and probably why I do sit here 25 years later, because I've learnt that you've got to monetize your business to obviously keep it going. And
yeah.
I have, like a lot of people in the industry, given a lot of goodwill away over the journey, time and effort for no repay or no pay, in terms of advice and whatever. You can't, if someone walks into the store here and says, I want your opinion about this, you're not going to charge them for it. But it takes time and effort.
Yeah.
And, better customers and whatever you'll do, again, I'm really fortunate. I've gained some incredible friendships with customers, over the journey. Some who now have shopped with me for not just the 25 years. I was 5 or 10 years before here at a store, learning my craft in between pubs, and a wine store. And so, I've had some people shop with me for over 30 years now, which is just start off. And then I see their kids now shopping with me. Oh my God, where did my life go? But it's a real joy to be able to have that sort of relationship. And for me, the other distinct factor of why the business has kept going and been viable is just the relationship marketing part. It's not, we're not just offering a price or, you've got to give people, there's got to be more than that.
Yeah.
So, yes, the goodwill then becomes, well, you can text me or ring me up on it whenever you want to ask me my opinion. If you're at a cellar door or you're at some salubrious restaurant and you want the, I don't do this for everyone, I might add.
I was going to say.
Yeah. But, better customers and people who become your friends because they've shopped with you for 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
Sure, you can give them your mobile number and they say, yeah, I'm at wherever I am, 10 minutes by tractor. No, I'm, wherever I am. And I've got this choice. Now, not everyone does that, and it's amazing how many people, it'll be 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning and somebody I'll know will be overseas and they'll send me a text through of a picture of, oh my God, I just drank this. I've had an epiphany, it's just so funny.
Oh, it sounds like a more personal kind of, app because previous apps that have come out like Vivino and, like Delectable and things like that, it's a bit more, it's better to go straight to you instead and a bit more personality with it and a bit more trusted advice rather than just a 3.5 star out of 5 rating.
Exactly. The hard part is when do you turn off? But, look, I think most people, pandemic was interesting. We ended up opening Sundays because the other thing we had to discover is to rely on our own logistics and transport. So I had all, so many extra people working for me, cousins, my cousins' kids, all sorts of people, driving around delivering, whether it was little Zoom tasting packs or whether it was, orders, because a lot of people wanted delivery because they didn't want to, and we're outside the ring of confidence or whatever the hell they called it. And so we're on the road a lot. And, so we opened up Sundays just simply because, and people would, if it was a sunny day, people would still get their cabin fever at 5 o'clock on a Sunday and it'd go off. So, anyway, we've now decided to back to close on Sundays, which is a good thing because they need that, the 1 day a week. I mean, I don't
need some time off.
I don't want to accept days a week, forget that. And look, again, the fortunate part for me is I can take time off when I want to. I mean, I've got enough staff here, albeit we are trying to recruit staff at the moment, like every industry and like everyone in hospitality. I mean, that staffing's a real interesting problem at the minute. Mm-hmm. But, look, it's the whole journey, through 25 years has seen so many ups and downs and learning processes. And, there are so many parts that I probably still haven't got right. And you sort of run by the seat of your pants on some things. And to be a small business owner, you have to wear a number of hats. And like most small business owners, usually, you might be good at 1, 2 or 3 hats, but you don't have all 7 or 8 or 9 hats.
Yeah.
So for some people, marketing and sales is really tough. And for some people, HR is tough. And for some people, there's so many things to consider.
100%.
Yeah. It is a very tough gig being your own boss, albeit, again, I'd be unemployable now, so I'm pretty happy that I'm my own boss.
Well, I've got. I thought it'd be a bit of fun just as a way to kind of finish up. I've got a few questions here that we can kind of race through. There's no clock. It's not like a speed round.
Sure.
But it's just some pretty basic stuff that might be a little bit of fun just to discuss.
This could be frightening.
First one, it's probably the hardest question you'll have to answer in the wine world. But what is your go-to wine, your favorite taste? What's been the ultimate number one?
So what's my best wine I've ever had? Or?
Best wine you've ever had?
Oh, well, yeah, no, it's pretty easy. Domaine Romani Conti is a high-end, to say the least, probably the most revered wine, arguably, on planet Earth, but it's a Pinot from Burgundy. I've had it in the last week. That's all I'm going to say. And I get to try it usually once or twice a year at best.
Yep.
Most people have it once in their life because it's extortionately expensive now.
Yeah.
I mean, extortionately. They're normally thousands of dollars a bottle and quite often tens of thousands of dollars a bottle.
Wow.
And they're just on another level. It's very hard to explain, but it's, I suppose, for most people, the easy way to explain it, it's a bit like, to see the Mona Lisa is something, even though most people, everyone I know that's seen it said, oh my God, it's small. And, for some people, they would look at a Domaine Romani Conti, also known as DRC, and say, it's okay, but, is that really worth $10,000 a bottle?
Yeah.
For me, if whether it's a Rolls Royce or whether it's, a great piece of art, I don't care what the price is because, really that's irrelevant for me. It's the higher grade of it and knowing there's an appreciation of how high it is. So, price, I've learnt that's something about living in this area or being in this area, I should say. I don't live in this area, but, you can see the wealth and therefore the price of things is, I understand that not everyone can drink $100 or $1,000 bottles, and I don't, not regularly, but probably more regularly than most people because it's my passion.
Yeah.
But yeah, I understand why people would pay ridiculous amounts of money for an old car that they love, or a piece or a painting that they think's amazing, or whatever it is. I think there are forms of art that are worth paying for.
Yeah,
and certainly DRC is the one.
Okay, how do you pick what to drink?
Yeah,
What's like the first? What's the most?
Well, what I'm eating is usually what determines
food.
Yeah, but I am guilty of. I'm a bit of a tragic, like Kath and Kim. I love Chardonnay, and so quite often I'll then, like I did last night, because I had a piece of salmon. I get a bottle of Burgundy or a bottle of it's a white Burgundy in this case. I do love Chardonnay. There's something about Chardonnay as a varietal I really love. But I drink every varietal, don't worry. Yeah. Not afraid to drink varietals.
Which international wine do you wish you had more access to in Australia?
DRC. No. Yeah, high-grade Burgundy is becoming really tough because there's such a clamouring for it from the Chinese and the emerging Indian upper class and just around the world in general. So, yeah, that's becoming hard. That's probably the easiest answer. Yeah.
What's the next big kind of, up-and-coming wine region that probably some people haven't heard too much about?
Yeah, always a tough one because some people go, I've heard of that. And the trouble is you've got to remember that, it's 5 years from the time you plant a vine till harvest, first harvest. And so emerging regions, really, people would say, well, I know about that region already. I still think Heathcote is going to be the world's greatest Shiraz area.
Okay.
I always thought Margaret River would be the greatest Cabernet area, and still do. I think that'll, it's a big, it's not a big, it's a ridiculous statement to say it's going to overtake Bordeaux because it just doesn't have the enormity in terms of production and area, etc.
Yeah.
And obviously Bordeaux's got a couple of thousand years history over Margaret River, which is 50 years old. But when you consider how good Margaret River Cabernet is at 50 compared to Bordeaux at 2000, it's staggering. Right. And, Heathcote Shiraz similar, 30, 40 years worth of Shiraz against the Rhone Valley with a couple of 100 years, is just ridiculous how far Heathcote's come in a short time.
Yeah.
Albeit, to really answer your question properly, I think some of the areas in Tasmania that will suddenly take, Coal River is obviously a just out of control region now where people are just clamouring for plots down there.
Right.
And most of Tassie will be like that with global warming. Places like, I hear a bit of talk about Mount Gambier, which is not a known wine region at this point at all.
Yeah.
But I hear several friends from Coonawarra and other areas, South Australia, talking about that coastal region. Fleury has become a fairly more popular region in the near past. And, that Mount Gambier even further south, which, it'll take a generation. So, I won't have to worry about it. But, England, the south of England, with their sparkling production.
Uh-huh.
It's just, when you think about it, they've got the same underlying soils as Champagne, but, it's only taken the last 10 years, let's say, before a number of people have started investing in doing facilities down in the south of the UK, and, there's some amazing knee timber and different ones there that are just coming out that are, as good as Champagne.
Most underrated wine?
Varietal or actual wine label, or
let's go.
Sorry, I'm being wanky.
We'll do. Well, varietal's probably a bit too vague.
Yeah.
Most underrated wine by producer label.
Yeah, that's a really good question because I could think of some that I think are just ridiculous. I suppose if I think about that question, it has to be what's ridiculous value?
Yeah.
So the biggest selling red wine here, almost I think, by label, would be the Wild Duck Creek Yellowhammer Hill, and just for the sub $30 for the deliciousness. Not a really great wine word, but I know the winemaker pretty well, and to say the least, and grown up with the whole family that have run that winery for 30 plus years, and and they would say the same word almost, because it's the want to have a deliciousness about it that people go, wow, that's really good, but it delivers.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like it's like a fantastic pizza. Pizza's not a salubrious food group, let's say, but I think everyone would agree that when you have a fantastic pizza, it's great. And that's sort of what like Wild Duck Creek Yellowhammer Hill is. But I can think of a number of wines like that that are just ridiculous value.
Yeah.
Pikes, Riesling. There's so many.
And you might not answer it, you don't have to, but most overrated wine.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I'd never want to bucket anyone.
Yeah, of course.
And of course, also, and there would be people out there who would say, why would you pay so much money for a Burgundy or so much money for first growth Bordeaux or whatever? And I sort of understand that. It is ridiculous how much, those wines have become now. But when you try wines like them at 20, 30, 40, 50 years of age and you see what they become, it is just marvelling at quality with age.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I could answer one specifically, and I wouldn't want to offend anyone, but we do Grange Shiraz challenges almost. It seems like we do them every second week now. I think I drink more Grange than most Penfolds winemakers, but we do a Grange challenge where we look at Grange versus 12 other $50 to $200 reds.
So you're doing all blind tasting.
All blind tasting here in the cellar, and they're hugely popular for them. And the thing that comes out from that forum regularly is, well, God, isn't Grange overpriced, Phil? But it's the thing is not to kill, to kick Grange or demean the product. And Schubert, who discovered it, Max Schubert, was a visionary. And it's our first growth. It's an amazing wine, and when you drink it with age, it is a fantastic wine. But it does, especially when you're looking at current release stuff. And I mean, ideally, you'd look at it with age, so that's the other interesting aspect. But reality dictates that, is it really worth $900 or $1,000 a bottle when you can buy stuff at, 70 to 100.
Right.
Hentley Farm, Pondalawi, Wild Duck Creek, whatever it is, that is not that disparate, it seems, in quality and character.
Two more. Does the quality of the wine glass, when you've got your different glass for each wine, does it really make that much of a difference for that wine?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think to have good instruments by which you enjoy wine is quintessential.
Yep.
So I've always been a Riedel fan. So Riedel is Riedel like needle, not Rydell. Riedel stems, and there's so many now. I mean, there's a Zolto and all sorts of different stems, but we stuck with Riedel for as long as I could, since I've been here. And they have an incredible range, and they are ever evolving, and they're now on their, I think, 9th generation, which is just quite incredible. And they're very specialised, and we do lots of Riedel masterclasses here, where you can see the differential, and it's obvious. It's it's like we call it the David Copperfield night, where it's almost like a magic act that we take one wine from a normal, ordinary ISO glass that you would use sometimes at a tasting place or at a winery, and then put it into a Riedel glass, and it just looks so much different.
Oh, that's great.
And so there's no doubt to be able to demonstrate that is the key to it. And I think there's a huge thing. And the only trouble with then discovering that is that and realising that some varietals taste better out of different shaped glasses is that then you've got to have a heap of bloody stemware, which is fantastic when you're a retailer of them. But it is a distinct thing. I think if you're going to buy good wine and spend good money on good wine, you might as well have good glasses to drink them out of.
I think it was my stepbrother Andy who first got me onto pour your beer into a wine glass and just drink it out of a wine glass, purely just for that thin lip.
Yes,
it just glides down. It's delicious.
Yeah, and all that. I think people forget about, and that's the thing about wine. Not only is it not just the taste, it's the texture and the length in the palate, and there's so many aspects to enjoying it. And when that's pointed out to you, it makes more sense.
All right, and the final one is, what is your favourite scene in a movie or favourite movie that has a wine scene or is about wine?
Yeah, well, Sideways is obviously...
That was gonna. My one is when they're opening cork after cork after cork at dinner.
Sideways is such a funny film, and it's so. I've only seen it about 4 times, which sounds enough, but I've had other movies from when I was a kid, like Mad Max, that I'd watched about 100 times. That's because I was silly. But I just every time I watch Sideways, I think this is such a good show. There are so many good wine shows. There are a number of good ones, and the Netflix series about Somme. With sommeliers, and there's a number of really good wine films. Just watch 3 Days of Celebration, which is a French film about Burgundy, just recently.
Okay. I haven't seen that. Let's check it out.
It's on Netflix.
Yeah,
I think Netflix and Amazon. And that was about and really interesting story about a tough year in Burgundy, but also this sort of annual party that they have, and how the Burgundians all get together. And And again, when you've been to Burgundy or you've been to a place, then you can see it relived. It makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been to Napa a few times, and that's why Sideways was great, and I loved, but they were that was a really terrific film. That was about, characters of that was just so well made. And it's funny, the guys who run Village Roadshow shop here, and Robert, one of the principals, or was, they've since sold recently, but he, and we would discuss wine films, and he says, Phil, you realise wine films don't make money. They don't really get run down by the general public. And Sideways was one sort of anomaly.
Broke through.
Yeah, but, because there's so many, there's a book called Shadows in the Vineyard, which is about DRC.
Oh, okay.
Which is one of the great reads. And I gave Robert this book and said, this is your next wine picture. This is like years ago, about 5 years ago. And he said, you never make money on them, Phil. And that's the trouble, it's very hard because it is a passionate, it's a certain area of certain passion.
Yeah, it's pretty
Not
niche.
everyone's, it's like, like cars. Some people, you're either into cars or you're not.
Yeah.
I love cars, but, not everyone's into them. So it is, it's a form that some people are into. And again, for most people, wine's just, for a lot of people, it's an ancillary to eating and the meal, whereas for me it's a main part of it. It's
Yeah.
as you rightly say, I always think about what I'm going to drink before I'm going to eat. So and that's because of what I do. But so it all depends on what your focus is. But certainly wine is an incredible socialization lubricant, and it's also a fantastic way to be able to talk to people about what the nuances are when you understand them. And again, just to do the courses here, I get great joy, and I still do the intro courses, 1 or 2 weeks of those, because I just love seeing people who are on that ground zero part.
Yeah.
Trying to launch into their what could be.
Pass that bug on.
And it gives me the memory back to when I was like that, many years ago.
That's great.
And so that reinvigorates me. It's fantastic, and I love it. And so I think that's the joy of wine, is that it's such a big learning process. And some of the kids almost vomit when I turn them here and I say, it's going to take you 5 or 10 years. They think, I've got that long. No, I'll only learn it in 2 years. You're not that smart. Well, it doesn't get like that. It does take an incredible amount of time and effort, and visiting places and trying wines and reading, and there's so much to it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to it, but it's all good fun.
Well, Phil, on that note, thank you very much for having me here. I do have a dinner party tonight, so I'm going to pop upstairs. I'm going to have a little look around because I do need to buy some wine.
Awesome.
Maybe you can give me a discounted bottle of DRC. Maybe it's up to you. But thank you.
I wish we had DRC. But yeah.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you. Cheers.